understanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
The school bell's gone and it's a Thursday night again and it's education tonight. So thank you very much for tuning in tonight. As always, we've got an action-packed show. And to the other side of my screen, that side of my screen, I should do that, is Mr. Brent Poland. Good evening, sir. Are you okay?
Yeah, we're the wrong way around. We're normally the other way around.
I know, yeah. It's the Ant and Deck thing, isn't it? Someone's put us the wrong way around. We're not meant to be.
Whoa.
Too much.
The helpful elf. There's
thank you. All is good in the world. Thank you very much for.
Thank you, helpful elf.
So we've got an action-packed show for you tonight, and we're really pleased that straight away we'll try and get straight to. We've got Dr. Pam Jarvis joining us, who's a chartered psychologist, a historian, researcher, grandparent, and a journalist as well, who's wrote fantastic articles about maths, and hopefully she can kind of talk us through kind of the question tonight, which is, do we think it's the end of academies? And where is the kind of future of academies kind of going in England particularly? But it's a really interesting kind of topic to kind of discover, because we've sensed for a while, Brent, haven't we, that there seems to be a little bit of a shift in tone, a little bit of a change in the way things are going. So it'd be interesting to explore that tonight.
I think the mood music obviously has changed at the Department of Education. There's a realization of really the horror that we've been speaking about for the last 10, 15 years, that in education, from SEND to funding to the PFI to the buildings, there's just so many things going wrong with education that we've been saying. And so far, so good. The mood music coming out of the Department of Education, and particularly the minister, seems to be in the right direction. The key thing is obviously making sure that follows through and the funding follows through and there's actually action. And again, when you look at the history of things like academies, this is part of both governments have been integral to these things like academies. So therefore you are unpicking not just 14 years, you're unpicking a lot of things that were put in place before even you and I were teaching, and both of us were 20-year veterans. So it is about, obviously, where is the direction going with academies, multi-academy trusts themselves. I think there's a knowledge gap. I think, and our second story will allude to this, where I don't think a lot of people in society have caught up to the nature of schools any longer. I still think they think schools are is business as usual. I think a lot don't realize what multi-academy trusts and trusts are, as opposed to the school's difference of a school under an academy and a school which is still under local authority control. And I still think that's stealthily been done, almost like a semi-privatization of education through the back door, and connected to Ofsted as well as being that. But as we saw last week, as we reported last week, we're very disappointed with obviously the Ofsted grading system, because that was an exercise in supposedly big listen. It was an exercise in supposedly change. And what's got us really flummoxed is there's no real change there. It's just a change of style, which led us to when we had a meal the other night, didn't we, at our second anniversary meal of Teachers Talk Radio. So we decided to have a little weekday out and go to a concert, and we had our cheeky little and the coats were needed because it was the coldest restaurant in history.
I mean, cost of living and everything, but that was kind of it was like going to Winter Wonderland, wasn't it? I think what you have to say here, Brent, is we went out for an Ofsted. We had a cheeky Ofsted.
We had a cheeky Ofsted.
Yeah. And if you don't know the joke, I'm not going to go through it tonight, but you can go through Weekly Review, you can go on Twitter, you can see the new kind of rating system, and you can see the kind of memes with the Nando's scaling with the Ofsted scaling.
We went for a medium.
They're quite humorous.
We went for a medium. Okay, so what else is new in the world? And this one perked my interest. Because whatever happens in the States seems to happen and come over to the UK. And the story coming out of the UK, the US at the moment is obviously going to be box office. But they have appointed their education minister, who's none other than former Miss Vince McMahon, Linda McMahon, the CEO and first lady of wrestling, who was seen in the 1980s and 1990s actually, doing pile drivers in the WWE. Well, she's been appointed as their education minister, and what's potentially going to happen there is, much like many other things, she will possibly be tasked with dismantling the American educational system and educational establishment. So that's who's been appointed over there, which is quite interesting. That you get we're going to have possibly radical change there, which I think fits nicely to what we're suggesting here, which could be a reverse radicalism. Because if you think about it, academies, multi-academy trust was meant to be a radical sort of shift one way. Are we suggesting that shift has failed, and that we're going to return to renationalization the same way we're talking about renationalizing the railways, water, etc.? Is it a failure of privatization, the same as other sectors, which is contradictory to health, because health are talking about increasing privatization in a sense, allowing more private sector in. What we're really saying is the opposite here in the UK. But I thought that would be quite interesting. That is the I'm waiting for JBL's comment on this. I'm waiting for one of our.
We've got a regular listener from America. They're really interesting to kind of hear that. I've had a really interesting week, because we've done a whole week where we kind of part the timetable, and we've done a UK Parliament week, which is a fantastic opportunity to get students involved in democracy, British values, and everything else. We've had a great time, and today was the day they were kind of building manifestos. So I've been looking through some of them, and they're quite interesting. But I see some really positive things. There's a lot of stuff about kind of equality coming through with kind of kids, which is great. But some of those kind of right-wing thoughts are kind of in there, and we kind of have to kind of deal with them as because that's where politics is sometimes at the minute, isn't it? And children are listening to that. And we've said before, kind of, we've got to be careful how we communicate, because it gets picked up and it kind of gets run. So I do want to kind of move on to get Dr. Pam Jarvis on. So I just want to kind of a quick hello to our sponsors, and say hello to John Katz.
Well, it's actually, I'd like to say a kind word.
Oh, sorry, kind. Sorry, I missed the cue, didn't I, for the punchline?
You missed the cue. And now a kind word to our sponsors. Sorry. Compassionate.
Thank you, Brent. Sorry, I apologise. I've ruined your joke there. Please forgive me. Maybe we'll have another Nando sometime. So if you just use the code JCTTR2425, 20% off your order at John Katz Bookshop. And we're also sponsored by Parentkind. And you can visit parentkind.org to learn more about reaping the rewards of working in partnership with parents, which actually was another show, wasn't it? We talked about kind of that relationship with parents. So all of our sponsors are on brand, and we're on brand with them. So that's fantastic. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Dr. Pam Jarvis onto the show tonight. Hello, Pam. Yeah, okay. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can.
Fantastic. So we picked up on your article that you wrote in the Yorkshire Byline a couple of weeks ago now, about kind of you've done multiple articles that are all kind of linked in there. And me and Brent were kind of discussing this, and you kind of hit that kind of point perfectly for us, because we were thinking, has the mood music changed a little bit? Is the story changing around Matt's? And then obviously your article hit. So just want to go into a little bit of kind of what your history is with this kind of story, and where it's led you in terms of the research that you've done.
Okay, so yeah, I had 25 years as a teacher in various, I think I've taught in just about every sector there is, HEFE schools. So that was quite broad. I also did a short exchange to a US university, so I know a little bit about what goes on there. But when you're talking about the US, you have to take into account you're talking about the States, not the US, because they have their own education. They run their own education, and one of what Trump is doing is handing it all back to the States. But if you look at Project 2025, there's a bit of a sting in the tail because the federal government has always controlled the states by giving them money for some things and withholding funds for others.
Mhm.
So there's a power at the centre. It's very interesting. But academies come from the charter schools. The idea came from the US.
Yeah.
Charter schools were put into tough city areas because obviously, I read a thing about somebody who said, well, so we have problems with rioting because people go out with bricks and they set wheelie bins alight, but in the US they go out with AK-47s, and the same problem exists in the schools. If we think we've got tough schools, I've never taught in one. I taught in the university, Salem State, which was in Massachusetts near Boston. Very some of the students did actually address some quite tough areas, but I don't think quite that tough.
You never come across
Um,
any vampires there, did you?
Oh, yeah. The witches. Yeah. I stayed in the Bewitched Hotel, actually. I don't know if it's only me who's old enough to remember that, but the one they used in the 1960s for the Halloween program. But anyway, so yeah, charter schools. So that's where the idea for academies come from. I knew all this already, but before I started on the mats here, because I studied obviously history of education. Our so-called what turned into mats were city technology colleges, which was a new Labour idea, which looked at the charter schools in the US and said, well, could we? This inner city schools were not doing particularly well. It is it's absolutely true. In the 1980s and 90s, there'd been, an argument about discipline in them towards the end of the 1970s, actually, when I was at school. And you can actually watch a wonderful interview with David Bowie on YouTube as a young man, where he talks about his right to have long hair because he'd. So the sort of flavour of the city really in the 1970s. And what the government were concerned about was obviously raising standards, and the Blair government. And they said, okay, well, let's try this thing called city technology colleges. Now, I don't know too much about them because they came along when I was actually teaching in school and I wasn't teaching in a city technology college. So I'd be quite interested to hear from people with that kind of experience. They did have a reputation as being sort of quite hot on uniform, and discipline was quite sort of strict, but I don't think anybody really, sort of accused them of doing anything terribly bad, or it was just
So
something.
really,
It was an experiment.
it was then raising standards, improving standards, and
Well,
improving outcomes,
I,
and closing social mobility gaps as well. It's kind of like in that new Labour-esque education, close those social
yeah,
mobility gaps. They
I
pumped a lot of money into urban areas. This was part of that program of
it
let's do
was.
urban regeneration, which was well-meaning, wasn't it?
It was, and I'm not aware of any figures that showed they did sort of dramatically better, but I do know that during that period, the results and everything from the London schools started. I went to school in inner London, started to rise, and there seems to have been a reasonably good job done in London. But one of the problems with that is there's so much money pumped into London, and everything that goes wrong in London is in Westminster within 10 minutes, and this went down in this school in the Old Kent Road or whatever. It's going on in West Yorkshire. They don't know about it. So I think that's a bit of a sort of spurious kind of route to go down, because the London schools do so well in many ways because they are London schools. They get the attention, they get the
Yeah, they've
so,
got the
and I
cultural
think they
element.
get more money.
Yeah,
It does cost more to educate kids in London. It's true. So there's lots of arguments there, but I don't really sort of want to visit those. If we
Yes, fine.
go to the mats, the reason I really what hit me in the eye about the mats really was a story about a mat in the the area very close to where I live. one set of my grandchildren actually live on the edge of the catchment area of this particular mat. It would be unlikely that they go to it, but it would have been one that might have been in the frame if it had been very good or whatever. But they, at this point, they weren't old enough. And in 2010, Wakefield City Academies, known here as WACAT, WCAT, just dramatically collapsed. And it collapsed so quickly that the kids went to school and they were told, sorry, we haven't got a school anymore. This was September 2017. And in the area, they had 14 primaries and 7 secondaries. So this was effectively, this is the problem in many ways with the McDonaldization of schools, because you know, it's not one school that's got some problem in this area. Maybe you could separate the kids up and, you know, send them 14 primaries, 7 secondaries. That's going to cost. That's really going to give you a problem, isn't it?
It's a bit like in the town where we used to work, Brent, where a kind of big supermarket comes in, you know, closes everything else. Everyone works the supermarket. Then if the supermarket closes, then all of a sudden the social problems are absolutely, you know, amplified, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. So this sort of took a while, and what started this didn't all come out at once. I wrote an article in 2019, which I do quite a bit of this with education, which is like a summary of stuff. It's not, you know, sort of on the point of this and this and this. It's more like this happened over a period of time. So
there's a kind of narrative in a story, and you find that with some schools, there is a long-running narrative in a story, and over time things get revealed, new information comes to light, and then you see the pattern, don't you? There's a pattern to some schools, some colleges, the way they get taken over. And I do like the term McDonaldization of education, because I've often referred to the semi-privatization of education, or stealth privatization through the back door. Because effectively, I think a lot of schools now are so corporate and so business-like. But as I keep reflecting, so even some of my colleagues, then we're getting the worst brand of corporate, because we're not getting flexi time, we're not getting compassionate corporate. In fact, we're not getting Google version corporate or that type of corporate. We're getting a horrible version of it, unaccountability, or our corporate where it suits the guys in charge, but not the guys on the ground. A kind of old school corporate rather than modern. Kind of like we're out of step with the private sector, who have moved on and who are doing more for their employees because of the market the way it is.
Well, one of the things that really annoys me, I suppose, is that before I started my PhD, I actually worked in FE. I taught HE and FE. I also taught a little bit of level 3 as well. And the college that I worked in, just before I left, I went and worked for the Open University and did my PhD. Basically, the head, I'm not going to say which one it is. This happened in several colleges in Yorkshire, so you can all guess which one it was. The principal, basically, to cut a long story short, it all went to court and had his hand in the till. He'd been doing lots of sort of quite sneaky things to get money, the funding that he'd had for the college, into his pocket. And things like this happened in several colleges in Yorkshire. I know it happened this was in 2000s. I know it happened in a college in Birmingham, because that was in the national press. There's 2 or 3 colleges dotted around Yorkshire. And it was very clear to me, and I think to everybody who taught in FE at this point, the problem was located in the individual, because of course they had been tempted to do what they did and they'd done it. But they had the opportunity to do it because of the management structure. And the government at that time, I think it was still Blair, but the whole of Westminster would have been aware that this had happened because of the model that they had put onto the FE colleges when they did what was called incorporating them, which was taking them out of the control of the local authority. However, when so I think Labour had already started their City Technology College idea by that point. But as soon as Michael Gove's backside hit the seat in the DFE, he was desperate.
Let's not put images in people's heads, Pam, please.
Yeah, he was desperate basically to take that city technology college idea. He looked at the charter schools in the US, and the idea of the mat came from that. And he wanted every school in England to be a mat. But they knew that that model had created mayhem in many FE colleges. So why did they do it? And I can't answer that question for you. I'm just
I've
asking
always factored
it.
in the free market liberalization and privatization and that idea. I think it was ideological. It wasn't
Political and
evidence.
ideological.
I think it was, yeah, I've always, the same as the curriculum, when I cross-reference academization with the narrowing of the curriculum, the prescriptive nature of the curriculum, the bloated curriculum, the academic nature of the curriculum. Adam, he taught in a school which did very well with vocational hands-on type, which suited the working class kids that he was educating. And that was all just thrown out. And all of a sudden, every kid has to write a 50-page essay in Latin. You know, that has caused so many issues, the way that our education system was then set up to suit a certain type of child, a certain type of learner, based upon his probably only experience of private school back in the day. And I think the combination of that and academization has done untold war damage towards a lot of children. And for me, it's it's not achieved any of the aims of closing gaps, social mobility, improving standards, and in fact, if anything, we've seen schools disassociated from communities, and that's been, for me, is the biggest issue. Have you any evidence of that disassociation that you come across, the way local people?
Oh yeah, I mean, I wrote an article about the Go curriculum, but we know, but this has been imposed effectively on all schools. So, you know, I was actually isolating the concept of the mat, and it's really a business concept. And they came in knowing that that business concept had not worked when they incorporated FE colleges. And now some people will probably come back and there'll be stuff in the chat saying, well, my FE college is great. That's probably true, because you've probably got somebody quite sort of moral and etc. who's sitting in the chair, who's in charge. This to me is at the heart of incorporation, because, and is at the heart of the mat. If you have a sort of morally sort of vocationally you know, directed individuals in charge of it, then probably it's going to work quite well.
Yeah.
But the problem is, the kids and the staff are absolutely utterly vulnerable to whoever sits in that seat. There are no checks and balances. If you've got a CEO who is I was going to swear then, but you know what I mean. If you've got a CEO who's an absolute horror, then that you effectively, there is your tyrant and you can do nothing.
And I suppose it is fair enough to say that there are some good examples of some good mats, some good examples of some good academies, some good examples of some good CEOs. And I know one nationally, and I won't mention because he's somebody I admire, has a trust, which always seems to be somebody who speaks sense, and he's in it for, I think, the that's what I was just saying, Mr. Rogers. You pipe down there.
We're just talking about good academies, aren't we?
The balance. Yeah, there are some excellent academies, and there are some excellent academy leaders, and there's one in particular that sticks out in my mind who always, even during COVID, I thought to myself, that's the academy I would like to work in. That's the CEO I would like. That's the individual who I would say has a vision, and their children in that academy are lucky to have somebody who is altruistically driven towards education for the means. And there are some like that who remind me of the do-gooders of the Victorian era, who were the individuals who set up schools. And that's what you're really saying, is you run the risk of having some altruistic people who are in it for the benefit of others versus some who are in it for the benefit of themselves.
Well, I think what Pam's saying is the model just allows for that to happen, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Can I just kind of come back again, take it back a step? Obviously, this was, as you talk about Michael Gove, obviously the ideological kind of drive at the time was around this idea of breaking up what he called the blob or whatever. And obviously there's that famous the Toby Young's article about the prisoners, the blob, and all that. That was kind of central to that thinking at the time, wasn't it? That there was this block of people, i.e. teachers like us, that were basically preventing this system from progressing. And the real problem is the teachers.
Yeah. That's what he thought.
Hmm. So therefore,
You know,
the academies was the kind of the privatization of it. I guess the thinking was if we brought in kind of CEOs, a business model, etc., competition, then obviously that will break up that blob, and we'll be able to control education to the way we want it.
That's the ideological bit, isn't it? And I'm sure it was there, but basically, businesses make money for people. They make big wages for people. They make big wages for people who are friendly with other people, shall we say. And this goes on. It doesn't go on in every map because some people are, you know, as you say, altruistic. They're doing it for the right reasons. I should say, for the record, my own grandson, one of my grandsons, goes to a small mat. And, you know, that's fine because the people who run it seem to be very nice people. But that's the risk you take because it's like any business, isn't it? You know, if you get it, you can get people who are altruistic in business, but basically the business model is cold hard. I'm in it for myself. I'm in it to make money. And what the non-teaching, there's an awful lot of non-teaching roles in a lot of maths. Managers. I saw someone advertising for a business manager. I don't know what a business manager's doing in a school. I might be a fossil, but sorry, you know, why are we spending public education on business managers? You know, there's so many schools in the district. The parents make a choice for the child to go to school. Why do we have someone? What business is this person managing? It was, you know, it's this massive salary as well. It's I don't. Education isn't a business. Children aren't soap powder. They're not biscuits.
But I think for some of us, because I came from the private sector before I went in teaching, I actually worked for a bank. So when I first came into teaching, I saw a kind of very kind of, compared to where I was, a very backwards system. And it's kind of a big shock to me. So when it was kind of first announced that my school was going to be taken over and kind of given the kind of private kind of wash, it kind of made sense to me at the time because I thought, well, you know, I'm seeing here in this school, this place is really inefficiently run. You know, wouldn't it be better if we could share our resources? You know, get one kind of
economies
of scale, yeah, all the good business studies stuff.
Yeah.
And it all sounded
different mats. Your career will be better. You can share with different mats. It's good for career progression. You can move around the mat. We can homogenize. We can do in-house services. We were sold all that. Sold all of that.
So that all sounded very, very positive to me. And when it was sold to staff, I think we all kind of pretty much at the time kind of signed up to that because we thought this is good. I guess the bit that you're saying, the shock to me, was 5 years later when we finally got to see the CEO and he came down the drive in a Maserati. Mm-hmm. And we're thinking, you know, that was like a light bulb in my head. I was thinking, oh, wow. So our kind of wages, our resources have kind of stalled. We haven't seen any of the benefits of that economies of scale because it could have been there. And now it seems to be that the money is going somewhere else. So your articles, you know, have certainly kind of rung true in what I've observed, because I've seen kind of the teachers and the pupils getting less, and the kind of the hierarchy seems the top of the hierarchy seems to be getting more.
I've got family members in the NHS, and I think it cross-references nicely with the bloated middle management in the NHS and the misappropriation of funds, not going into the classroom, the lack of teaching assistants, lack of teachers. It's not going into our wages. And yet the government says it's spending a record amount of money in education. It does beg the question, like PPE and like many of the other scandals, where has the money gone?
Well,
where is the money going?
Yes, I mean, we're sitting here and saying this and that about maths, but we could be talking about the water companies, or we could be talking, you know, basically it's the same problem. It's that you could be talking about the NHS. We've got a bunch of managers in who are being paid huge amounts of money, and they're really, you know, you could do without them.
Yeah.
You know, I would. Sorry, I'm showing my age, but personally, I go back to the Hitchhiker's Galaxy, you know, A, B, and C arc. Effectively, yeah.
No, I like that. It's good.
Effectively, you've got a B arc, and you know, just let's get rid of the B arc, please, because nobody would miss them, and that would save us an awful lot.
It does go like that, doesn't it? When you've not produced the form, the bureaucracy, and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, when you have to.
Yeah.
It has got a little bit like that. Many teachers I've known forgotten about
Yeah, who
education
listens to
more than
teachers?
politicians,
Exactly.
business leaders. But who listens to teachers? The JBLs is
Exactly.
right. I mean, we've been screaming from the classroom for a long while now and being ignored. So I'm going to take
Can
to the
I
point.
just, sorry,
Yeah.
go through the actual cost of this mat?
Oh, please do. Yeah,
Yorkshire?
because
Okay.
brass tacks. Yeah.
Well, obviously we don't know the whole of it, but it came out in the local press. So to start off with, when it was clear that this mat was in trouble, they were given £500,000, £500,000 to keep on track. It went bust anyway. It cost £200,000 to wind up its business affairs. £440,000 it had been found had gone out to companies that were owned by the CEO. This was in the local press. I'm not saying it did. I'm not saying it didn't. I'm saying a paper saw fit to publish this. If people want to read my article, they can hit the link and they can see where that was published. The PTAs from the various schools said, can we have our money back, please? Because, we've done this and that and, had our Christmas fair and whatever. And no, it had been put into school funds. So £220,000 that the PTA had actually raised for the schools, this was all the schools, that was gone. So, I mean, I can't add that on my head. I'm a psychology and history teacher. I'm not a maths teacher, but that's a lot of money, right? So all of this money was created. Would that have happened if the schools had been left with the local authority? No, it wouldn't. And I think the last article I read, the work on the last article, to be quite honest, is principally Warwick Mansell's, and I should say that he did the research for a group called Case. It's actually worth reading the main reports. There's 2 reports, and they go through meticulously where the money goes and what happens to it. But the summary is that on average, MATs spend less on pupils and teachers than the LEAs. They spend a lot more on the managers.
I think I've got some slides.
Yeah. The biggest worry are what's called sponsor schools, which are the ones that have been forcibly academised, and a lot of those are in tough areas and have had lots of problems. Some aren't. But in the ones that have been forcibly academised, there were younger, more poorly paid teachers. There was a huge staff churn in one. I think it was a quarter of the staff in 1 year left. And there's also this problem of what the press, which I hate, calls ghost children, who this was always a bit of a problem in inner cities and in poor areas, but that has definitely racked up. And I actually did write an article called Ghosting Children, because I don't think that it's particularly helpful to talk about ghost children, but I think it's certainly helpful to talk about ghosting children.
Yeah.
What is it that made them so
absolutely,
they just disappeared? They disappeared and nobody can find them, and they can't find the parents.
We did a show, Pam, with Terry White. I don't know if you kind of know her work.
No, I don't know.
She came on and kind of went through what's going on and kind of how complex that issue is. But you can listen back to one of our shows there about I think we called it kind of missing children. I think that's the phrase we use, but because we're concerned about this kind of notion of ghosting. There was also a slide, I'll just put it up for you, Pam, around kind of the age profile of
that's right,
stuff within these schools. I guess that there's 2 potential kind of conflicts here, isn't there? There's one that obviously older teachers are leaving potentially, but the amount of young teachers could suggest a kind of bit of a power imbalance within schools if there's a lot of kind of inexperienced staff.
The pay obviously is related to that, isn't it? Because the younger teachers have less experience and they're earning less. One
Yeah.
of the things that worries me in a tough secondary is, as any secondary teacher knows, the nearer the teachers are to the age of the kids they're teaching, often the harder they're finding it to actually manage discipline. I'm not saying that for every teacher, but that's a kind of, sort of it. I thought was a sort of middle-aged woman. It was much easier for me to manage, because you didn't have that closeness in age, and I don't know, they weren't pushing it quite so much. But if you've got schools full of young teachers, and it's a tough school already, I mean, this is to me, and you've also probably in that setup got very young managers and inexperienced in it. I mean, middle managers, not top CEOs.
But you've also
Um,
losing what I have effectively got is the generational teacher who can know they've taught the parents, they've taught the brother, they've taught the sister. You've got that already
mm,
invested within the school. You've been at the school, you know the school. It's your community. You are a community-based teacher. You walk down the local high street. You have an impromptu parents' evening. You've got that connection to the school. It's not just a school; it's part of the connection to communities. And teaching as somebody who, what I would say, used to teach in a very community-based school has changed because some of the more experienced teachers, one way or another, are no longer there. Some have felt forced out. Some have basically burnt out. And what you're seeing is people just not putting down roots any longer. A very transient teaching profession that isn't invested as much in the communities, and therefore that makes it more difficult because relationships are extremely important, aren't they? And what you've got with academies, therefore, is more turnaround of teachers. They don't stay long enough to build those relationships, and therefore that makes behavior even worse and less personal, I suppose. And then I suppose that leads to retention problems because if you're not as happy at a school, I'd question the happiness. If people, staff turnaround is massive in a school, it speaks volumes as to staff welfare, staff well-being, but also staff morale. And if staff morale is very low, that's not a good indicator of what knock-on effect it is to the kids, isn't it?
well, some Mats also have schools across the country, don't they? And they want to actually engage in sort of standard practice. But I don't see how that works because the school needs to be at, surely, at the school I taught for longest in anyway, was absolutely at the heart of a small North Yorkshire town community. I
Mm,
can't imagine, somebody coming in and taking that over who was, running a school in London and another one in Nottingham, and we're all going to do the same thing. It would
Yeah.
have, I would see that as incredibly alienating for, the whole community.
Well, it did. We've got first-hand experience of that of a school that
Mm,
that's in a town where we used to work, and the actual it was the centre of the community. It was a small town, and the community school was actually at the centre of everything, and it still kind of is, isn't it? It hasn't kind of lost all of it, but one of the things that happened almost instantly when the signs were changed was the word community actually got ripped out of the title.
yeah,
And that kind of was really heartbreaking for a lot of people because it said so much about the place. It had this word community within it, and it really was a community school. It's an area where people are not kind of leaving; they're kind of staying in their town.
yeah,
And to have that kind of word kind of ripped out, I thought showed a real lack of understanding of what this place is, what the purpose of this building and this kind of this thing is in the centre of this town. Um, but you can see that quote from kind of Gillian Keegan there. There's obviously something that the Conservative Party were pushing right up until the end, weren't they? The election, do you think there was a problem with them being so kind of ideologically tied into kind of one model? That there
well,
wasn't,
yeah,
there,
but I
there
mean,
was,
this isn't just. The thing is that ideology is not just placed on schools, it's placed on the whole of the, sort of children's services network. The absolutely worst scandal in the children's services is the homes for children,
yeah,
children's homes,
yeah,
usually with older children in them. And I think it's George Monbiot actually who wrote an article where the amount of money it costs to keep one child in this place, and most of this is going to managers. it's all contracted out and it's going to companies and God knows where it's going, but we're paying it. And the same thing goes for the money that's going into maths. Again, Warwick has the figures, but it would seem that they take more money from the Exchequer maths than the schools managed by the LEAs. But
Yeah.
there seem to be more problems coming out of them. The younger teachers, lower paid teachers,
Yeah.
managers with company cars, all this kind of thing.
I've
Can you
often
see,
felt,
sorry, Brent,
yeah,
can you just answer the question from Paul below, Pam? I don't know if you can see on the screen, because a lot of teachers are kind of in this position now where the primary schools in a dire position. They obviously had the conversation about academy. Obviously, do you think it's a bad idea? I think I probably know the answer to that, but do you think?
No,
And do
not
you think an
really. I mean,
alternative?
I don't know who's in charge of it, so that's basically a how long a length of string question.
yeah.
If you've got somebody ethical who's wanting to take it on, maybe not. I just don't know. It's just the chance you take because you just
It's
don't know if
You're
you're
playing
being
academy roulette, aren't you? Effectively, you're playing academy roulette. You
Yes,
may get
see.
it is, isn't it? It's a lottery. You're playing academy roulette, and what I'd follow up with Paul's question is really is the crux of what we probably need to wrap up in a minute. This question is: are academies, do we think, on the way out? The overall question, because obviously what Paul's saying there is there a point of academizing now, or are the cavalry coming? Do we envisage the future a reversal of this policy, or a slowing down of it? I.e., do we see the Labour government going, okay, let's reverse course, but we can't do it quickly. Like everything else, we're just going to slow down the process of people converting and maybe start reversing. Because one of the problems I have about reversing that is you've hollowed out the local authorities. You'd need to boost up the local authorities. You'd need to reintegrate the local authorities. You'd need to put back all the cuts, the social services cuts. You'd need to reintegrate everything before you could put schools back under local authority control. You'd have to put local authorities back before you could put them under local authority control. So where do we see academies dying, so to speak?
Sorry, I don't think financially this is doable, frankly, guys. Because if you look at the money that we need in other places, basically, if we've got poo in the water, we've got to deal with that. But kids can, there are still schools for kids to go to. This is the thing. If we have had all this money spent on PPE and it's gone into people's pockets, then we've got to find out where that's gone to. So I think, education is probably not at the bottom, but probably at the top of the middle of the ladder for funding. And actually changing that over is going to cost a lot of money. But one of the ideas I'd sort of just throw into the ring, and I don't know if it's possible, or before schools actually were managed by LEAs, I'm going back to 1902 here. Um, Public education, state schooling. It was only primary schooling, but late part of the 19th century. And when
Are
they
we talking the
first
liberal reforms here, Dr. John? Are we talking some history here and the liberal?
no, I'm talking about what I remember. No, I'm not really. When you go, when you go back, basically, the first management system was something called school boards. Now they had various problems because you did get local politicians on them. There's a really good book called The Stars Look Down from the 1940s. It was made into a film and a television program. And I don't know, I've got my dad's copy on my shelf somewhere. And it's about a Labour politician between the wars, and that he sits on the school board, and it's quite interesting as to what goes on. But I think when my kids were at primary school, I sat on governing body, which to my mind was the only good thing probably that Thatcher ever did, which was the local management of schools. They did it for a reason, which was to push out the LEAs, but
In the
it
interest
worked
of balance, there is some
quite
positives about
quite
Margaret
positive, yeah.
Thatcher.
Which well, it worked quite well because you had parents, you had teachers, you had the head teacher, you had some community reps. The local GP, for example, were sat on our school primary school board, and sometimes you had community reps, sometimes they were counsellors, and by and large you did get some really good discussions. The parents would often they'd come to us and say, well, we want this, and then you'd say, well, the parents want this as a parent governor, and the teachers would say, well, we can't do that because of this. And it was all sort of very very civil. And so the thing might go back to, well, if you can't do that, can you do this? And then the community reps might come in, and the head would then oh, well, that's not a bad idea. And I would wonder if we could somehow turn maths into something like that. You couldn't turn it into exactly that, but effectively, if I personally would definitely stop this business of maths having schools in Bristol and Newcastle, and I think they should be within a particular radius. And why within that radius could you not, instead of CEOs with company cars or whatever, put together a bunch of people like the head teachers and parents from representing every school and community reps? Why can they not be the management body? And
So what you're really saying is it's not the death of maths, but maybe it's the reform of maths that we need.
I think that's all we can do. I mean,
I think this should have been tied into the Ofsted stuff. So
yeah,
this is what we need with the Ofsted reform, is tighter rein on what you're saying.
Agreed, because Ofsted was used in order to academise, because Ofsted, let's be honest with you, was part of the weaponisation of Ofsted to create schools and force them into maths. And I'm not saying you reverse that by using an aggressive Ofsted to now unmat schools, but at the same time, Ofsted was used that way. Ofsted can be used in a positive way to reform schools and maths that way. Because one of the things that annoys me is schools are judged.
Yeah, I think we need to caveat, Brent. I think we need to say some might say that.
Some might say, I might say, schools are judged all the time, but where is the map judged? Because schools sometimes are harshly judged by conditions outside their control. They have no control over budgeting, no control over some things, and yet they're judged, I think, unfairly, because the MAT may be causing the schools problems, which then Ofsted come in and Ofsted give the school a judgment rather than probably factoring in the management structure. I think Ofsted should be judging the management structure of the MAT and the school rather than just the school.
But wouldn't teachers like to be on the board of their maths? I mean,
yeah.
Would they not? Yeah. They get no voice. Parents get no voice. Teachers get no voice. If you put the boards together that managed a MAT in that way, then you would have the voice, wouldn't you, of the people who are absolutely involved in it. And
before
I don't see anything
before my academisation, I was a governor for two terms with 19 other governors across different sectors, parent governors, two staff governors, a teacher governor, support staff governor, and we had eyes on everything. We had a say on everything. That all went. That level of accountability no longer there.
Why could you not also put 2 sixth formers on? So therefore, then you get the kids' voice, don't you? As well, and they often I think you get kids saying, well, that doesn't work for us because we never thought of that. But we don't get teachers' voices, we don't get parents' voices, we don't get community voices, we don't get kids' voices. What use is it? Effectively, just junk it, and you can keep the boards, but put people who've actually got some investment.
It's the scrutiny, isn't it? It's the quality assurance, the scrutiny, and the oversight, and the checks and balances against excesses and all the corrupt. I completely agree. I think you're onto something there. I think you really are, and it's so obvious, isn't it? You think, why hasn't it been proposed? I suppose, but it would take courage to propose that, because then if you propose that, you're admitting something, and you're admitting politically, you're admitting that academisation hasn't been a success. And which two of the political parties wants to admit that both of them have invested in this project, and it hasn't really borne fruit when you look at all the statistics of league tables and international league tables, our social statistics. We can't argue that our education system is in a better state as a result of it. So therefore, who wants to admit that?
I wouldn't say that Labour really invested in the type of maths system that we've got now. That was something that really came on board in 2010. They created the city technology colleges, and I mean there were questions about them, but not not to that level. And I mean, when you look at the thing that I started with, the incorporation of FE colleges, that was a major, not, it was after Thatcher. I think it was on the drawing board with Thatcher, but that was a major government, as in John Major. That was a major government initiative. That wasn't a Labour initiative. So I wouldn't say their hands are completely clean, because they never are they? But I don't think they would lose a lot of face by saying, "Look, guys, this hasn't worked. Let's,
So if
let's
they're listening
think of
to
another way
us,
through."
maybe if they're listening to us, they may be getting a few pointers and making a couple of
Hello,
notes.
Bridget.
Well, welcome to the morning teachers talk radio.
Okay, I think we'll call it there, Pam. Thank you very much for your time tonight. We really do appreciate, and keep doing all the good work that you're doing. And you now know people are listening to you, and
Yes.
teachers are
That's nice.
Teachers are picking up on your stuff. So we really appreciate your time, and hope to
But also,
see
I'd
you.
like to say I'm always in there for the teachers. I haven't talked about my Ofsted article, the one about the way that Ofsted talk to teachers, but that one, I wrote that in an absolute fury that teachers should ever be addressed like that. Just disgusting. Anyway.
Well, if you've had a good time tonight, Pam, we'll hopefully get you back on in the future. That'd be fantastic.
Absolutely. Keep up the good work.
Okay then. See you later, guys.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Right, so let's talk to our sponsor.
Yep. Do you want to? Yep. Is it another joke, or we got another joke, or
do we have a kind word from our sponsor? Nice.
Oh, nice. Oh, sorry. I'm the punchline. we need to work on this. So this show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. We're also kindly sponsored by Parent Kind, who are a national charity representing parent views and voice and championing parental participation in education and school life. By fostering strong school-parent partnerships, we can boost student attendance, improve behaviour, and advance academic performance. When parents actively participate, students thrive. Join the movement that's reshaping education for the better. Visit parentkind.org to learn more about reaping the rewards of working in partnership with parents. So thank you to both of those.
What's really nice about that, plus what we left with Pam, is there's a nice dovetail there, isn't it? Where we were talking about let's get parents more involved, get teachers more involved, decision makers more involved. And then we've got one of our sponsors who's basically saying we want parents more involved. I mean, how much more on point do you get the point being made that maybe one of the problems we have in education is a kind of the top down, do what you're told compliance model, as opposed to a democratization, I think, of education, because rather than the dictatorial version of education where we have more people within communities, more parents having a say, and therefore more people then who I think are invested in education. I mean, maybe I'm just being idealistic about it, but I think our sponsor perfectly fitted into what we last said there, which is really good. Okay. Should we get to
so the UK pretty much had the return of the snow day on Tuesday. So it's always exciting. I shared with my daughters, and if you remember, Brent, the local radio station went through, listed all the schools in alphabetical order, and luckily ours began with an E, so ours was quite quick to kind of come up, so we kind of could get ready for sledging ASAP. But if you had a school further down, you'd be waiting a while, and I remember us all huddled around, and then a big cheer went up when your school got announced.
Honestly speaking, I don't like them. I'm gonna go the other way. I think we shouldn't close. Simple as that. And I'm not gonna make myself popular. Teachers Talk Radio are all gonna switch off now and go, "What's he talking about? We had a day off." No, I don't like it. I'll explain why. And this is a lovely Simpsons episode from 1990. It's one of my favorites. Bart gets an F. And the story with this one is fantastic. Bart gets an F. He feels really bad, and he's going to get failed, and it hurts him this time. Really hurts him this time. And his teacher's like, "She used to fail." Now she gives him one more chance and says, "Do we do the test tomorrow?" And Bart prays for a miracle that night because he can't study. He struggles to study and he can't get his head around it. And he prays for a miracle. And then, boom, he opens the blinds and there's a snow day. The Springfield is snowed in. And he's about to go out the door and have, have a great time. And Lisa just tries and says, you prayed for this. And he studies hard and he has a day in and he gets a D minus and he passes. And that's one of my favorite Simpsons episodes. And that becomes, the kind of the declare the greatest day in Springfield's history. Everybody's having fun and throwing snowballs. But yes, the full list of schools that close. It's a paternal problem. It's always a paternal problem. And here's the DFE advice on this, because I spent my day off doing some work and then answering some social media locally, spotted pages and all those pages where people just pile on and go, teachers, and you're like, oh my people, would you just give it a break? Here is why the schools closed. Schools in other educational settings have settled plans and policies how to deal with adverse weather conditions according to the government. It's up to schools to decide whether it's safe for them to open or close based on the risk assessment and taking local issues into account. What things should consider? Decisions are made locally based on common sense, and there's a large range of things that schools will consider. The level of transport, preventing teachers getting work, school safety around the sites, temperatures in the buildings. If they do so temporarily close during severe weather, they should consider moving to remote learning so people when it's safe to open. So in our case, it is the fact that the buses are double decker. The bus company will get on the phone to my head teacher and say, we're not comfortable with sending the buses. So in many ways, the head teacher's hands are tied. Now, in years gone by, I reflected in this 13, 14 years ago. I remember going in on a Sunday with other members of staff, with the head teacher and other teaching staff, and we dug the school out. It makes me sound like it's the 1950s, but we dug the school out, getting it ready for Monday morning. Since then, I have to be honest, I reflected on why do we not do that now? Well, because it's parents. If you had a child fall over, imagine you have a head teacher who says, I'm going to keep the school open, get on in there, let's be resilient. They do it in Russia, they do it in Austria, they do it in Canada, they do it in America. Let's go, British kids, in you get. Bang, there's an accident because the roads aren't gridded. There's an accident with a bus. There's an accident with a child falling over. Does the parent A, well done the school for sending my child in. B, you risked my child's health and safety. I'm going to sue you. C, why did you dare open the school? And what I'm saying, essentially, we're going to see some of the comments here is that you cannot please the general public. Everybody loses it because they're affected. And you see some parents who will, this school's impacting me. We had this issue during COVID. Open the schools. I don't care. I need to get to work. What about the health and safety of kids? Well, the kids are all right. They don't get it. What about the adults? Well, that's what they're paid for. So we've had this before, this idea that schools somehow can be not open when the rest of society is open. And I get the frustration with that. Personally, I would like to see schools open as much as possible because these reasons. Schools need to sometimes defend themselves. People will attack schools, undermine schools. And I think if we're having days off that they perceive, they then say, well, you fine us for holidays. How is attendance important? And there's a couple of snowflakes and you're off. So it's a little bit of the optics of it. And I think schools need to consider that. And I think some schools probably err on the side of caution. Maybe some teachers err on the side of caution because their name is on it. They're responsible. And in the culture we live in, people can blame schools. Or they can turn around and reflect on the fact that we now live in a very risk-adverse health and safety culture society, which you're damned you do, you're damned you don't. I don't know what you feel about that. I would try and keep the school open as possible if I was a head teacher, but I would probably feel differently if one parent complained that there was an accident, a car accident, somebody was injured. That would
it's just one of those things, and I get it because, we're parents as well. But I also just think, kind of, it's just one of the British traditions, isn't it? Sometimes, it doesn't happen very often. It's kind of a little bit of a win that everyone kind of, kids love. And my daughter ran out straight away with the sledge that I had when I was her age. And I thought this is just kind of a wonderful British, one of those eccentric British things that everyone cheers, the school's closed, we grab our sledge, and for the 1 or 2 days a year we can actually go out and enjoy the park, really kind of just free, kind of it's a really freeing moment. And as long as we kind of get back on with it in a couple of days' time, I don't see any particular kind of harms being done. But but I get it. I mean, I had
never snowed when I was growing up. That's because I grew up on the coast. There was no snow.
I had to essentially walk past my daughter's school to get to work, and I did see the kind of irony of me kind of walking in, to a massive kind of college. that 3,000 students managed to get in, and a local comprehensive school couldn't. But I do get it. But we are pretty much out of time, Brent. So that was a kind of a quick one. So we'd like to.
There are schools in the country I checked tonight, Dorset and Cornwall, who'll be closed tomorrow. So there are parts of the UK, and we've still got ice and snow outside our door, a little bit of ice, still treacherous underfoot, so be careful. But there are
of course,
tomorrow as well. So parts of the UK, enjoy your snow day tomorrow.
Yeah, so we'd just like to say again, thank you to John Katz, and please feel free to visit JCTTR 2425 for 20% off your order, and please go and visit parentkind.org to learn more about what they're doing to make links and partnerships with parents. So that's it for tonight. Thank you very much, and we'll see you for another full action-packed show next Thursday. But thanks for tuning in. Good night.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.